Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. Mr. Merrifield, before I get to my questions, would you like to respond to some of the earlier comments regarding public participation? Mary Martin was from the committee, just came back and asked me, Mr. Merrifield, would you like to make some points? Would you like to have any response to that, or?
Yeah, I am firmly a firm believer that the NRC can and should do a better job of engaging with the public in two-way communication, and should also be leaning forward to provide information to communities that may host nuclear facilities. Fully agree with that. Fully agree that more resources should be added there. Fully agree that the agency staff should be more engaging with members of the public, should be providing them information about what's going on. All of that I'm fully in agreement with. I do have concerns about the creation of a new office in equal standing to the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation, but with a mandate that will assist in submitting contentions and hearing requests, which are ultimately a challenge to the NRC staff licensing process. Challenges would then be funded by taxpayer dollars, such that the NRC staff could essentially use taxpayer dollars to come up with new and creative ways to legally challenge its own licensing decisions, potentially delaying those decisions in the process. So I agree that the agency needs to do more on engagement. I think that element of the agency funding a contentions process is not one I would support.
Thank you. I'll follow up with some other questions. As you know, that the nuclear industry requires a predictable licensing process in order to secure financial support from investors to commercialize their technologies. Regulatory predictability allows financiers to estimate timelines and cost accurately. Draft bills such as the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act seek to address this. Mr. Merrifield, what are your thoughts on the approach taken by these bills?
As a general matter, I think many of the bills that are before this committee today are beneficial. I think I would include within that the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act. U.S. NIC is supportive of the expedited review timelines contained in the legislation, and we would certainly be pleased to continue to work with the committee to enhance the legislation.
What else can be done to strengthen these bills to support more of these new technologies?
I'm sorry, Congressman.
I'm sorry. What else can be done to strengthen these bills to support the commercialization of the new technologies?
I think, well, frankly, one of the areas that was talked about earlier today was the process that is used to, the fee-based process used to apply to these reactor designs. And I do think that whole process was driven by the Omnibus Budget and Reconciliation Act, which created the NRC as a fee-based agency. The current fleet of reactors did not have to go through that process. They had to pay a fee for licensing, but it was relatively modest in comparison. I think there ought to be put into place some guidelines that would perhaps have a cost share requirement for advanced reactor developers. 80% of the regulatory costs paid for by the federal government, 20% by the licensee, ability to perhaps waive fee requirements until after the reactors are built. I think there's a variety of things that could happen there that would be helpful. I think also the agency should be held, once it has accepted the application for review, it should be held to the timeline and perhaps be held to the amount of hours that it would spend on reviewing that application. And if it went beyond that time or beyond those hours, those would be borne by the federal fisc rather than imposing those on an advanced reactor developer.
Okay. I'd also like your thoughts, Ms. Korsnick and Mr. Nordis, on this particular subject. Would you like to add anything to that? What else can be done to strengthen the bills to support the commercialization of some of these technologies?
Yeah, earlier I think there was some conversation around maybe additional metrics that could be put in place, and I think that would allow for some of the transparency for how long is it taking to review some of this information, et cetera, so that you could see a pattern of improvement as they do more of these reviews instead of a pattern of additional resources and more time, for example. So I think some interesting metrics that would have to be reported back to Congress would be interesting.
Okay. Mr. Norhouse, would you say?
I I would agree. I think that, I'll just sort of connect this a little bit to some of the discussion around staffing and workforce issues, which is, I think there is reasonable concern that if you don't have an accountable, streamlined, performance-based licensing process and you add additional staff, that you don't actually get additional efficiencies. So I think that the staffing and workforce issues at the NRC need to be much more explicitly tied to expectations of expeditious review and
Thank you very
determining
much.
licensing.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.